Thanks for the introduction. My name is Matthew Finlin. I'm the founder of Human Potential Academy. Today I'm going to actually be speaking about mental and emotional health, the mind, and adversity. It actually goes really well with our past speakers, so I want to thank both all the speakers, of course, but it ties really well in with what Shane was saying, as well as our past speaker, our last speaker we just had on. The 5 pillars of human potential are the spiritual pillar, the mental pillar, the emotional pillar, the physical pillar, and the financial pillar. Mental and emotional health is something that, whether we like it or not, unites us all. It supersedes culture, it supersedes class and money. Hurt people. And as our past speaker mentioned, all of us occurred childhood traumas, and we oftentimes get traumas from our loved ones. Everyone has their own battle to fight when it comes to emotional and mental health. And what I love so much, especially with my recent journey, past couple of years, really getting into yoga, is that yoga teaches us and trains our mind to handle mental and emotional situations. The first thing I'm going to talk about today are the 2 main types of brainwaves, which Shane touched on earlier. This is alpha brainwave and beta brainwave. Beta brainwave is the brainwave that we are in when we are living our everyday lives. When we're thinking, when we're learning, when we're doing, we are in beta brainwave. Alpha brainwave could and should be described as being in the present moment. Alpha brainwave is where we actually unlock our superpowers. For example, Michael Jordan, when he's scoring 40, 42 points, 44 points, 47 points, 50 points, he's not thinking about what am I going to have for dinner. He's not thinking about, oh no, is my son or daughter okay? He's completely in the moment. And this is what unlocks that unbelievable superpower. There's another aspect to beta brainwave. This is called high beta brainwave. So high beta brainwave happens when we're anxious. High beta brainwave happens when we're thinking about the past with regret or embarrassment, or maybe we were hurt or harmed and we're regretting looking back at the past, not in the present moment. High beta brainwave also happens oftentimes when we are looking into the future, oftentimes thinking of a negative hypothetical situation, which oftentimes never pans out anyways. There are 2 primary aspects of our nervous system as well: the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is activated during times of stress. It can cause us to tense up. And what happens when our sympathetic nervous system is active for a sustained period of time is we end up retaining water, we end up retaining food. High beta brainwave is directly correlated to incredibly stressful sympathetic nervous system and oftentimes uncontrollable emotions. You just can't control them. Our past speaker brought up the amygdala. The amygdala is part of the limbic system. The limbic system is kind of the middle part of our brain. It's responsible for our emotions and has a lot to do with our survival instinct. What happens is when our emotions are uncontrolled and fiery and all over the place, our limbic system actually shuts down our prefrontal cortex, completely overriding it. Inside our prefrontal cortex, we find what's called executive functions. I encourage you to do research on this. Executive functions have to do with logic, deductive reasoning, long-term planning. So when we're emotional and uncontrolled, our emotions are shutting off our ability to think clearly. We can activate our parasympathetic nervous system using a lot of different, very simple techniques. When our parasympathetic nervous system is activated, we are relaxed. It's when we're on our way to sleep, when we're eating, when we're in a comfortable environment. And our parasympathetic nervous system allows us to harness our executive functions and stay in control. Yoga has many teachings that allow us to stay calm. In fact, doing yoga getting into those deeper asanas that hurt. What do when we're deep in those stretches? We breathe. We breathe slowly. It teaches us to be calm. Our sympathetic nervous system gets activated, and we breathe after we're tensed up, and we relax. We always, in yoga, ground ourselves with breathing. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do, everyone who's watching this live right now, everyone in the room with me, everyone who's catching the recording, is we're going to do 2 deep breaths. I always train people when you're stressed, whether it's in yoga, whether it's in everyday life, breathe like you're sleeping. So we're going to breathe in for 4 seconds and out for 6. Okay? In. Out. One more. Out. You can feel yourself just calming right down. This controlled breath is your superpower when you are faced with adversity. This brings me to my next point, something called AQ. This is actually coined the science of resilience. We've all heard of IQ before. IQ is your intelligent quotient. Basically your ability to learn, remember, and regurgitate information, your skill set. Many of us have heard of EQ. This is emotional quotient. This is your ability to recognize how other people are feeling, what emotions they're experiencing, and then act accordingly. In my experience, very few people have heard of AQ. This has been around and actually coined in the 90s. And AQ stands for adversity or adaptability quotient. This is the science of resilience. When it comes to training IQ or EQ or AQ, you can train IQ, you can sit down and read, you can go practice your craft, you can develop your ability to learn your skill set, remembering, using the information. With EQ, it's really easy to train as well, actually. You just need to bring awareness within the presence of others. Get out of your head and empathize. What's going on with this person? Adversity quotient is an interesting one because there's only one way to train your adversity quotient, and that's in the face of adversity. When you're going through adversity, you can train it. I always teach people, I call it smile through the trial. Smile through the trial is not repressing the emotions. It's not repressing the pain. It's just recognizing that right now I'm faced with adversity, and this is an opportunity to strengthen my adversity quotient so that when, not if, when I face adversity again, I'll be able to handle it, control my limbic system, activate my executive functions, and stay calm in the stressful situation. I want to end my talk before speaking with the amazing panelists with something that I believe is the most important topic of all, and this is awareness. Awareness is the seed of spirituality and religion. The first stage of awareness is called reflection. Why did I do that? You sit and you meditate on why, and you keep, okay, well, why did I do that? Well, why? And you'll eventually land, most likely, at a childhood trauma. Look back in your memories, go deep, like the butterfly effect. Back. Find your why, and then you can heal from it. So I'm really looking forward to introducing our panelists here. We're going to get them all online. The panelists are amazing, powerful, wise women, some of my favorite humans on the planet. Remember, mental and emotional health supersedes culture, it supersedes money, it supersedes wealth. Whether you like it or not, it unites us all. Hurt people hurt people. We are hurt only by the ones that we love. Everyone has their own battle when it comes to mental and emotional health. So now it's time for me to introduce the panelists. The panelists could turn on your cameras now. In no particular order, we have Elle. I love Elle so much. Elle is a phenomenal holistic health coach. She's from Texas, currently living out one of her dreams in Nicaragua. Her life looks pretty good, I have to say. And she has an incredibly powerful story, and she's probably one of the most kind and graceful individuals that I've ever met. We have one of my best friends, Claire, who I miss, haven't seen her in years. She's studying law in London. She's from Hong Kong. Claire is hands down one of the most intelligent and compassionate people that I've ever met. We have Lily. We do have Lily? She did. Yes, like you love you, Lily. Lily's like 4 a.m. in Hong Kong right now. Amazing. Thank you so much. Lily is an elite Tantra practitioner. She's from Hong Kong. I was absolutely blessed to meet her when I was living in Hong Kong. She is probably like the only thing more impactful than her story is her as an individual. We have Jess, one of my best friends. You're going to see her later today. She is an embodiment coach, local Vancouver, and just unbelievably talented, like unbelievably talented woman. And finally, but not certain, was it last, but certainly not least, we have Jill. Jill is also from Vancouver. She is a breathwork and Reiki practitioner. I haven't known Jill that long, but in my short experience with her, she's easily one of the most knowledge and professional women that I have ever had the pleasure of working with. So thank you all so very, very much. So for the panel, I want to remind the panelists, Jill, 2 to 3 minutes per answer. I know we're talking about, this is fun. We're talking about some incredibly massive topics, and obviously each of these questions we could probably do an entire hour talk on, but let's just keep it short, sweet, impactful. This first question, I'm gonna ask all of the panelists, and this is for us all to just witness like the courage that it takes to be vulnerable. Again, all of these women are so skilled, so powerful. And so I'm just gonna go around and I'm gonna ask them all this one question. What is one of the most impactful memories that you have regarding adversity or trauma? In a few sentences, please. Claire.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Claire. So this is a obviously very intimate, personal question, but here we are in a safe space talking to people about, I guess, their adversities and traumas. So I guess my first one is deeply connected with my family. My parents were divorced 3 times apiece, and my home environment was quite turbulent. Even though they gave me everything in the world I could ever want in terms of education, I never had to worry about where my next meal was going to come from. It was an extremely emotionally unhealthy environment. And as I saw my mom become a lonely, bitter woman, I started fearing that I would become that as well. And I inherited things that weren't just positive, but also negative from her. The second adversity I would very open to say I'm going through right now. I'm currently going through a career change at the ripe age of 18 or 28, sorry. And this has required a lot more study than I thought, and a really deep seated imposter syndrome and just maybe even self-deprecating talk is kind of creeping into my mind. Surely no one wants to invest in a 28-year-old's future. Surely I'm not smart enough to, stand out from all my other competitors. And yeah, this last point, Matt and I will be talking about a little bit later.
Thank you, Claire. Elle, what is one of the most impactful memories you have regarding adversity or trauma?
Thank you so much, Claire. I can identify with you in a lot of ways. And my childhood too. But before I move into that, I just want to say thank you to Aditya and the entire team. You guys have done an excellent job. So just a moment of appreciation to you. But to get back to answering your question there, I'd say my childhood was rather tough as well. And I can identify with you, Claire, on a little bit of the opposite end of the spectrum and how mine was, I experienced a lot of trauma in regards to physical, mental, emotional abuse. And what that did for me is that developed a limited belief that I was unlovable. And in feeling and thinking and believing I was unlovable, I developed all these other, wonderful, interesting strengths in my adversity training, meaning like I learned how to push through pain. I learned how to meet my own needs, even whenever my caretakers were not meeting my needs. I learned how to, I developed a lot of grit. And most of all, I learned how to connect with my intuition. I learned how to hear what other people were saying without them saying it to me, essentially empathy. And so I would like to just take a moment to share what my most impactful memory was, which happened fairly recently in my life, which was with my father transitioning. And again, I grew up believing that I was unlovable, right? And one courageous thing my father did in the last year of his life was that every action that he took an action to show me that he loved me, but I still had this limited belief that I wasn't lovable, right? And so I wasn't believing that. And in his transition, he left a legacy for me that showed me of how deeply loved I am. And so I kind of took you guys through a little bit of a maze there, but to answer your question very directly, Matt, my adversity in my life taught me how to unconditionally love. It taught me unconditional love.
Thank you, Elle. Yeah, looking forward to our questioning. Next, Jill, what is one of the most impactful memories that you have regarding adversity or trauma?
Yeah, similar to Claire and Elle, the traumas that were the most profound in my life were sexual and physical abuse, and how that manifested before I started my healing journey. And even still to this day, there's like layers upon layers, is that I was so agreeable. Like I wouldn't want to do something, but it was dangerous for me as a child to speak my mind and my truth if it went against what my caregivers wanted me to do. And I was physically in danger. Therefore, growing up, I had zero boundaries. And that was with partners, that was with guys who like wanted sexual relationships, but I didn't. But I couldn't speak my truth and hold the boundary. And I didn't know why until I realized there was a samskara, which is Sanskrit for trauma, because when I was a child, had I done that, again, I would be in physical danger. So that's just an example too for other people who might have had traumas like that growing up, of why sometimes we can't speak our truth or we can't hold the boundary. And then you look at what's under it, and then you can shift that, heal that, transmute that, and then you can hold the boundary and not draw those other situations into your life as an adult anymore.
Thank you, Jill. Next, Lily. Lily, what is one of the most impactful memories you have regarding adversity or trauma?
Thank you, Matt, and everyone here today. I'm really happy to be here with you guys, all from Hong Kong. One of the most impactful memories, and I think a lot of people watching this may be able to relate to this, and that is when you come from a multicultural background. And for me, it's coming from an Asian background, but having grown up all over the world in a Western society, you start to have a very fragmented sense of your identity, where when you go home, you are met with certain expectations and ways of living and belief systems. And then when you go back out into the world, where you're interacting with your friends, your colleagues, and media even, you are met with another different set of belief systems. So that sense of fragmented self actually led me down over 10 years of suicidal ideations, multiple suicide attempts, drug overdose, emotional, mental, physical, sexual abuse. And finally, the thing that shifted me immensely was I was, even after I dealt with all of these mental health issues, depression, anxiety, mood disorders, what really shook me was my role model, my father, who was the strongest man in my life. He one day, after 5 years of depression, committed suicide in our family home. And that was that pivotal moment of, wow, something about my reality needs to change. And I've already gone down so many paths of seeking, conventional therapy methods, and nothing was working. So that's when I really, like so many of the women here, started to look inward. Where's that unconditional self-love? Where's that compassion? Where's that forgiveness? How can I help myself? How can I be that warrior, that superhuman that I've been seeking all my life to change my reality? So that's yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, powerful, holy. And Jess, again, last but certainly not least, what is one of the most impactful memories that you have regarding adversity or traumas?
So mine is slightly different. My first memory started when I was 5, actually. I think it started a little bit before that. My dad worked in the Air Force and he would leave for really long periods of time. And I didn't really realize how much that affected me until I grew up. And when I was 5 years old, we moved from the UK to Canada. And while this was quite exciting for me, I actually didn't realize how much it impacted me until about 3 years ago. Because when we moved to Canada, I actually moved into a deep sadness as a 5-year-old girl. And I had a deep sense of loneliness because the school I went to, I was bullied. And then I moved schools and I still felt different because I had an accent and everyone thought it was weird. And then it was the dot-com crash, and my dad had a hard time finding a job. We were living off of almost nothing as a family of 4. So I went from this beautiful life to pretty much having nothing and living in poverty and, renting not the best homes and living off of canned food and hot dogs for quite a long time. And while it's not the typical trauma that you hear of, it dramatically influenced my life. I didn't feel good enough. I was, scared of being abandoned because I never saw my father. And this led me to things like disordered eating and depression later on in my life. So that was probably the biggest impact on me from a young age.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate all of you women. Of course, you already know this. Just ties into how I ended my speech with awareness. Right? All of these women have been able to transmute these traumas into superpowers to become so much more powerful. And the only way to do that is by bringing awareness to it. So I want to thank you all so much for that. Now we're going to get a little bit deeper into learning and hearing some of the wisdom that these women have to offer. And we're going to start with Claire. So Claire, you mentioned self-deprecating talk, and self-deprecating talk is one of the leading causations of emotional sickness. Why do you think people feel unworthy or are unable to recognize their inherent talents?
Yeah, so as you said, Matt, this is something I have definitely experienced in my recent in my life. And in my opinion, self-deprecating talk is a way in shaping a certain narrative about yourself. It's as simple as this. It's hard to objectively judge your worth, capabilities, and skills because you have your doubts, your ambitions, your emotions clouding that objective valuation of yourself. So what does your psyche do? It creates a safety net, and it does this in 2 big ways. The first is that self-deprecating talk manages your own expectations of yourself. The less you expect of yourself, the less disappointed you will be of yourself. The more you qualify your failures, the more you can convince yourself that you have that leeway. But it also works the other way. The more you hype yourself up about something else, the more you can be bad about other things, as long as you strategically base where your ego, your confidence is. The second way is that self-deprecating talk appeases other people. A few of us have talked about being people pleasers, and I definitely empathize with that. You seem less arrogant, and note that your mind's priority here is how other people perceive you, not your objective ability, which is where this doubt is coming from in the first place. What an absolute shame that society molds us so that we feel safe when we don't stand out or we completely fit in. And then when you keep hearing this self-deprecating talk in your head, you become convinced that it's a reality, but really it's yours. It's one that's cradling your insecurities. Um, so yeah, ultimately, I think that self-deprecating talk, it doesn't allow you to recognize your inherent talents, and it does this because it procrastinates that real evaluation of yourself, because you're so preoccupied with all the many ways that you can fail instead of thinking about how failure can arm you for future successes.
Wow. Yeah, that's like one thing that, like, since I've met you, I've just been impressed after impressed after impressed watching you do things, and talking with you more in our monthly catch-ups that we have, and then discovering that you suffered from similar self-deprecating talk that I do is really hard for me to wrap my head around. So how is it that and how would you recommend that people create an identity of healthy and positive self-talk?
So obviously I haven't perfected this. It's a work in progress, and it will probably be for the rest of my life. But in my opinion, there are 3 key stages to doing this. The first is something you talked about, Matt, which is awareness. In order to change a behavior, you have to know when you're doing it. Note it when you start talking to yourself negatively. And it doesn't matter if it's justified or warranted, because you're talking to yourself in a way that you would never talk to anybody else. So in itself, it's bad talk. But let me be clear, this is not hiding away from your weaknesses. You can recognize your weaknesses, but you don't have to be mean to yourself about them. Another way that I personally do is I write about the things that I find negative, or that I say that are negative to myself. And then I look upon that and see, what are these areas that I keep saying negative things about to myself, and what could be driving that. So realizing that it is created within your mind. So the second stage is to break the cycle. So in order to stop this behavior, awareness is not enough. You need to follow up action in each instance that you're talking to yourself negatively, which essentially conditions yourself for change. Some things are to force yourself to compliment yourself after you say that, to force yourself to remember the good things about yourself. This is a really hard one, I find, but take the compliment. It's so easy to be like, oh, no, I'm not like that. I'm not that good. But take that compliment, own it, and remember that someone who doesn't know your deepest, darkest insecurities thought that that was a strength worth mentioning to you. The last one is change your mindset. And this is so much easier said than done. But if you adopt a rationality that encourages a positive mindset that you understand, that you resonate with, in your really, really difficult times, that's your tool so that you're forced to not deny it. Mine is fake it till you make it. I know this is such a cliche, but at the end of the day, confidence is a mindset. It's not something you're entitled to after you make 30,000 pounds a year or that you get a PhD. And so you have that choice to believe yourself just as much as you have that choice in order to better yourself and to better your chances of success. Also, game theory. What's the downside of faking confidence until you succeed? If you make it, you created confidence that helped you achieve what you wanted. If you don't make it, the downside is failing. But if you're going to fail, you're going to do that anyway. So force yourself to have that confidence. And that's a tool that I use when I start getting scared about myself, in order to bring myself a little bit of perspective, take myself out of that really stormy, negative environment that's going on in my brain, and then helping you realize that, it's just me that sees all of these ugly things.
Yeah, wow, fantastic. Thank you so much, Claire. Yeah, it's phenomenal advice. We're going to move on to our next now, which is going to be Elle and panelists. Really good on time, really good on time so far. Thank you so much again, Claire. Yeah, that was phenomenal. Elle, what is one thing that you believe is currently contributing to the mental and emotional health crisis?
Very easy. Toxic environments, detrimental environments where we walk away feeling weaker, environments where that disconnect us from our internal guidance system. And so one thing I have noticed about these detrimental type environments, and each person can define this for themselves, and they can only define it by stepping into that awareness that each of us have touched on. Whenever we step into ourselves, we want to ask ourselves, does this environment, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is, does this environment make me feel stronger or weaker? And if it makes you feel weaker, you're going to find it's going to disconnect you from your intuition. If we're disconnected from our intuition, we're disconnected from the thing that is guiding us towards our best, towards our highest potential, right? We'll find also that a toxic environment is going to ask you to betray yourself. It's going to put you in a position of self-betrayal. Excellent example is childhood trauma. If you have unmet needs, the child learns patterns so that they can meet their needs. And even if those patterns require us to betray ourselves in some sort of way. And so you'll find often that we are drawn to environments that ask us to betray ourselves. And you'll understand this is that if we have an insecure attachment style, our nervous system is going to feel more comfortable with a detrimental environment, just because it's what we're used to. And so again, we've got to come back to our awareness and ask ourselves, does this make me feel stronger or weaker? And I want to be very I am repeating, notice that I am repeating stronger and weaker. Does this make me feel stronger or weaker? Because repetition is an excellent teacher. But if you were to walk away from my talk with one tiny little thing, that's it. Because think about it. Think about the conversations that you're having with friends. Think about your work environment. Think about the tasks that you do. Think about the way you keep your home, maybe, ask yourself, do dishes in the sink make me feel stronger or weaker when I'm leaving the house in the morning? Or I don't know, maybe you're unique and dishes in the sink makes you feel really powerful. If so, I encourage that, but so long as that it's in line with your internal guidance system. I think that is a decent answer to what you're asking.
That's fantastic. Yeah, pretty simple, right? If you leave a group of people, do you feel powerful or do you feel drained? Are you energized or are you tired? What advice do you have for people who are currently in toxic environments?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I have a lot of advice, guys, but I'm going to do my very best to trim it here and make it very easy for you to take it home. And I'm also extremely excited to share it. But number one, identify it. Identify it. Just know it. You don't have to do anything about it. If you can just identify it and be aware of it, that is huge. Pat yourself on the back once you've done that, okay? Secondly, gather a diverse support system. And I'm talking about people who have your best interests in mind. You come to them, friends, and you're like, oh, this thing happened. I spilled coffee on my shirt today. That actually happened to me today. And my support system here made me feel stronger. But make sure that diverse, I say diverse as well, because you want different views, even people who kind of disagree with you on certain things, but they have your best interests in mind. I have people like that in my life. This is going to make you a more well-rounded person and assist you in making decisions that are, again, guided by your internal guidance system. And then all of this is going to guide you towards helping you in developing your intuition and kind of releasing that resistance that the nervous system has towards stepping outside of familiar environments, okay? Because when you step outside of that familiar environment, you'll have your whole support system and you have your internal guidance system there saying, hey, this is the right path. And then finally, believe in yourself. If you grew up in any environment where, I know it sounds very simple, but you were smart enough to come to this talk and hear this, you were smart enough to, identify the toxic environment. You are smart enough to find friends who can support you. You are smart enough to believe in yourself.
Awesome. So bring awareness to it, find differing opinions that support and actually care about your well-being. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Al. Yeah, thank you. I can see. Okay, next we have Jill. Okay, so Jill, you know, with all the mental and emotional health crises that are going on right now, it seems that directly correlated are addictions. And I want to know, how would you define addiction, and how would you define trauma, and what is the correlation between the two?
Yeah, so I think there's a misconception about what addiction is. Like, for those of you in Vancouver, it's like, oh, East Hastings, there's so many addicted people there. But as a society in general, there is so much addiction that we don't even recognize as an addiction. So my definition of it is any behavior that causes soothing in the short term and makes you feel good in the moment, but is harmful long term. So that could be drugs, that could be alcohol, that could be any sort of substance, that could also be overworking. Because when we're overworking, we're not present with our body. We don't have the time to process emotions, which I'll get to in a moment when we talk about what the correlation is and what trauma is. It could also be sugar, it could be food, it could be sex, it could be over exercising, like all of these things that, again, make us feel better in the moment, but are harmful in the long term. So none of these things are actually bad. It's the relationship to it. If it's like, oh, this thing happened, I don't want to feel this feeling, I'm going to go have a glass of wine, or I'm going to go for a run because I literally can't handle the emotion, that's an addiction. Trauma, again, I feel like there's some negative connotations around trauma. Like, we all have trauma. It's just stuck energy in the body from an emotional experience that in the moment we weren't able to process, usually because society says, oh, girls can't rage, or men or boys can't cry. Therefore, usually between the ages of 0 and 7, when most of the programming happens, but it can happen after, the stuck emotion is in the body, and it's in the body until it is viscerally released, which I will talk about in a moment. But you watch animals in the wild, or even pets or a bird, something happens, they get spooked, they shake it off, and then they go on. They process the stuck energy. Whereas us as humans, something will happen. Even I see this with clients with grief sometimes. Somebody will die, they won't grieve the loss. Therefore, the energy is still stuck in their body. And the correlation between the two is the addiction covers up the pain of the trauma. And how we release that is viscerally through the body, whether it's in breath work, meditation, yoga releases a lot. There's so many modalities, but the key is to release the stuck emotion. So it's like not why the addiction, it's why the pain, and how can I feel the pain in a safe environment, release it, and then you're free of it.
Fantastic. Wow. Yeah, that's really well said. Really, really, really well said. I didn't know how you were going to do it, but that was awesome. So Jill, then, and you and I have spoken about this in private, but why is it important for us to overcome our traumas?
Yeah, so many reasons. It's so important to release the trauma, because the trauma is subconsciously and unconsciously creating our behavior and running our life. So any place you're stuck in your life, or you have a repeated pattern or an addiction, there's a trauma there, which is fine, because I mean, it's fine when you recognize it, because we can then release it. Again, as Al said, the first step is awareness. So if we're unaware of it, we can't do anything about it. But once we become aware of it, it's like, whoa, every time like I'll give you a funny example, but it's a real example for me. I almost failed computers in high school. I was like really good in all my other subjects, and I almost failed. And my parents got really angry. They're like, what is this? So I had a trauma, a samskara in my body, like running my life. And people would be like, oh, can you just do this like computer thing? And it'd be a simple task, but I literally couldn't sit down and like try and do it without having an anxiety attack. So I just avoided it. the one day I decided I was going to do it, I sat on my computer and I cried for an hour and I just released it. And the next day I went back and I was like, oh, I'm actually like pretty decent at this. But it was controlling my life for like 2.5 years. I tried to build a website and I literally just couldn't do it because I wasn't willing to feel that. Another example is in relationships. So say you have abandonment issues, and as I did, this is another example from my life, and you haven't felt that, but you want a partnership. You will continue to draw partners who will abandon you or who will bring up that feeling until it's healed and released, which is a huge opportunity because once it is, it's like that anxiety, that fear of, oh, what if I get abandoned? What are they doing? Goes away. And it's like, oh, okay, now I'm okay by myself and they're an asset to my life. And if it doesn't work, then we can have this conversation, a conscious conversation of this isn't working. But until the trauma is released, the emotion, which isn't always comfortable, and a lot of times it's a lot of crying or rage, but then you're free of it. And I should say most people want to get to their CD, which is their highest life, when they're in the most joy and the most peace and the most abundance. The problem is a lot of people just want to get there, but we have to go in through the shadow. And that is where our traumas are up, release them, transmute them. And then we access our gifts. We all have God-given gifts. And then from there is the CD. There is no bypassing. Like there's no way to get to and unlock our gifts and unlock our highest self without going through the shadow, releasing them, transmuting them. So when you recognize, oh, I have trauma here, I have this feeling I don't want to feel, it's amazing because once you go into it and transmute it, your life literally changes in the best ways possible.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know you and I've had some really good conversations about that. Like traumas end up like, they become such a part of us. We label ourselves as this victim. And then once we overcome it, like we actually see the power that we have. And oftentimes when someone overcomes a trauma, they actually end up like crusading to help people overcome that very same trauma. So it's like a very powerful ripple effect. And it's absolutely why I chose all five of you for this panel today. Thank you so much, Jill. Yeah.
Thank you.
Lily, you and I have definitely had more intimate conversations regarding a lot of these tough topics that turn us into superhumans. And so the question that I've got for you is, shame and fear are often felt by people who are struggling with mental and emotional health. Why do you believe the world is unaccepting and judgmental regarding these things, even though we all struggle with it? You're muted.
There we go. Okay, so it's 5 a.m. here, so still waking up. Well, there's many layers to this, and one of the most prominent things that I've discovered is that we have been, as a collective, living in this very limited concept of a one right model of reality, which means that if you are not like me, then you are wrong. Or if you are not like me, then I don't want to deal with it. So we become very separated, very divisive. And mental health, emotional health really is, like Jill was just saying, it's an energy. Traumas, it's an energy. It's simply a state of being. So it's an experience, a symptom of the body sending us messages when we are off course, out of our true purpose, misaligned with our true design of our lives. So as a collective, why there's so much fear and judgment is because we have attached this very negative identity to mental health, depression, anxiety, whatever it may be, hence perpetuating the problem of mental health issues itself, when it is actually a problem. It's not a problem, it's just an experience. So just try to understand this concept. It is not the symptom of the events that we've experienced. It is not the trauma itself that causes shame and fear. Rather, it's the meaning that we as a society in the modern age have attached to these topics. So the words, the negative words, the images that we have attached to these events in our lives. And it's still not considered a social norm to talk about these things like depression, anxiety, even mood disorders openly. So when we are violating these norms, then we feel shame. So something that has really benefited myself and my clients is reframing what the meanings are to these traumas. So rather than creating negative images, words, and meanings to what has happened in your life, you start to attach them to more empowered, empathetic, compassionate, kind meanings. What has this experience done to elevate me, to benefit me? And replacing certain vocabulary as well. So one thing that has worked so well in my personal life and within my family, and we do this all the time now, is rather than saying I'm facing a challenge, I'm facing an obstacle, start to say this has been a very enriching experience. It's still challenging in the sense that it's enriching, but now you're adding this new layer of curiosity and fun and taking charge of this, what could be seen as a very negative, limited aspect of your life into something that is, hey, this could actually be a fun game for me to up-level my life, my emotional, my mental, energetic, and spiritual self.
Amazing. You may have partially answered my follow-up question. I really like that, by the way, rewriting the narrative. Like this is like ties in with what I was talking about, smile through the trial. Like you can take something bad and you can be like, oh, wow, I'm going to be way stronger after I figure this out. Instead of being like, oh, I'm weak right now. I love that. Despite facing these challenges, personally, especially, of course, regarding your father, how did you overcome it? And how has that impacted people? I know you expanded on that a bit, but we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, this is the common theme that we've been talking about in this whole panel, which is awareness, self-introspection, being able to be honest with yourself and your emotions and the reality that's going on in your life. And the reason for so many people why there's so many people suffering with mental health and emotional health issues is because of dishonesty. They're not able to face themselves with radical honesty and say to themselves, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. I'm actually not fine, even though I keep saying that I'm fine, and really start to dive into the shadows, the gunk, everything within that you have been in denial with. So again, going back to this idea of really seeing your life as a game, right? And something I like to conceptualize is Earth, that we have all been reincarnated into in this lifetime, is that Earth is a planet of emotions. We're here experiencing this life because it is the place where we are able to experience a whole spectrum of emotions, from what's perceived as negative, like anger and rage and tragedies, to bliss, freedom, compassion, kindness, and love. So really being able to experience all of this without placing judgment on it. So that's what I had done with my father, which was, in Asian society, there's so much shame and guilt around suicide. And when I chose to speak out about it, there was a lot of criticism from the community, even from my own family. But choosing to stay honest with that and telling the narrative as it was instead of sugarcoating it was what gave the power back to myself. And in me telling that story, created a trickling effect, a cascading effect that allowed other people to feel safe as well. To say, okay, well, all this time I thought your life was perfect. All this time I thought your family's life was perfect. But knowing that you're able to speak with such vulnerability and honesty and to share what would normally be perceived as weakness gives others the courage and the hope. And also the internal forgiveness to look within themselves and shift the parts of their lives that they're not so happy with.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lily, for being vulnerable and sharing those types of things. I really like, it kind of ties in with what Claire was talking about. And one of my favorite scholars, Jordan Peterson, talks about this too. It's like, treat yourself like someone you love. And so it's like, if someone you love was doing self-destructive behavior, you would call them out on it. But you wouldn't call them out on it and then tell them that like they're terrible and just rub them into the dirt. You would be brutally honest with them, radically honest, as you said, and then nurture it. Like call yourself out for your shortcomings, but then be nice and bring awareness to the actual movements that it takes to go forward. Be like, you know, this isn't the right thing to do, but I still love you. Thank you so much. Wow, powerful, sweating up here. Jess, what do you believe is something that people are not taking into consideration when struggling with their mental and emotional health, something that they're missing?
Well, this makes me very excited because so many ladies on here touched on this already. And we're seeing this like unification of almost like science and spirituality. And I think something that people ignore is how much we actually store our emotions in not only our energetic body, but our physical body as well. Our body is essentially a living library, and we can hold cellular memories in our tissues, our organs, our fascia. And I dealt with this myself with my own experience. I had so many trapped emotions in my body, and there's nothing wrong with emotions. Again, we're supposed to experience emotions. The issue is when they get stuck and lodged. Again, it's energy in motion, emotion. It's supposed to move through you. And so for me, I dealt with chronic health issues for a long time, specifically digestion issues, and then it manifested into mental health issues like depression, anxiety, panic attacks. And so I went to nutrition school and I was like, nutrition is going to fix it. And I did all the right things. And again, I was trying to think my way out of a feeling problem, which I think is such an issue in our society. We're so in our heads, we're so used to being analytical, and sometimes we bypass the wisdom of our body. Our body is ancient, it's part of the earth. And so for me, with my health issues, I went down this path. I uncovered the secrets of Chinese medicine and how each organ is correlated with an emotion. And that led me down to the path of Louise Hay was a huge one for me. And she correlates all of our ailments with emotional issues. And so I started to uncover these things, and naturally, I just felt some relief already. I started to think about things differently, and I started to appreciate my emotions for what they were. And then this led me to the path of fascia work, and that was such a deep transformative thing for me. So this is the type of body work. Fascia is super cool. There's so much new science coming out about it now, and how it might actually be, I think they're calling it an organ now, which I think is pretty accurate. But basically how it could be the thing that stores the most trauma in our body and the most memory in our body. So that was super powerful for me. And as you can tell, I'm super healthy now. I went from, getting stomach ulcers and having hormonal issues and depression to this. So yeah, I think that's
Thank you so much. That's reminds me of something that I learned like this past year. I was like, when we have a tight muscle, we have a knot in our muscle. It's not the muscle, it's the fascia. And so it's like when you're massaging someone or when you're getting a massage, you go, oh wow, my muscle's tight. It's not that actually, it's actually the fascia. So Jess, given your unique and comprehensive journey, what would you recommend for people who don't know where to start?
Oh, I have so many things. I'll start off with the free ones. The ones that anyone can do. The first one is actually just connecting with the earth. Now, I know this sounds like maybe a little woo-woo, but our body is made of earth. Everything that we have is made up of the earth. Like even my phone is made up of the earth. So connecting with the earth connects us with that frequency. And we can even see this in science with, magnetism, ions, even light and sound. It's incredibly powerful. So, bare feet on the ground, hands on the ground, sit on the ground, whatever you can do will dramatically transform your life. Another one that I love is dancing. And not the dancing that's structured. I'm talking about the dancing where you just do whatever you want. So you put on your favorite song and there's no judgment. And this helps, unlock our fascia and helps get things moving. And when we can get those energies moving, again, when emotions are stuck and lodged, that's when there's the issue. And as soon as they can start moving, the rest of the body and the energetic body can start to process those things. Shaking is also super powerful. So putting on some really fast drumming music and just really shaking your body and then being still is incredible. Like Jill kind of mentioned earlier, animals in the wild, they shake after they run away from a predator. And that's how they don't keep those things stored in their bodies. Another thing I really want to talk about too is just intention. Having the intention to heal, believing in your ability to heal. Our bodies are incredibly intelligent. And if we can sometimes, get the mind out of the way, the body will just start to do its thing and it will tell you what it needs. There's a reason why we have signals. There's a reason why we have cravings. And so being able to look at those things differently can be extremely helpful. Some other really powerful practices that maybe require someone else would be, breath work. So you can learn how to do breath work and then do it yourself because we all know how to breathe, which is cool. But you can also get a facilitation of breath work. You can get hands-on work and a more intentional practice there. And then obviously I'm going to talk about fascia because it's super cool. So there's multiple different ways you can use fascia. There's poses you can do similar to yoga, but just with a little bit more twisting involved. And then there's also hands-on work as well. And I've seen incredible results with this. I've seen so many people transform their lives through this. I actually had an out-of-body experience during my training, like I completely left my body. So it's very, very powerful and super cool. And then I just wanted to throw a few things out there for people that are maybe completely immobile. Maybe you have severe depression and you can't do anything, or there's someone in the hospital. So something like sound healing and using frequency is super powerful and you don't actually have to do anything. And then receiving some sort of energy healing like Reiki. And then again, intention. And what I really, really want to stress with all of these practices and what makes them powerful is presence. So just because we're involving the body doesn't mean we're actually accessing the body. You have to be present in order to do that. Otherwise, you're just dissociating. So it's the same as like if you use exercise to, de-stress, say you're a runner. Are you running away from your problems or is it a meditative thing for you? Are you being present with yourself? So I just really wanted to stress that as well.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Jess. I had a final question I was going to ask. We're running short on time, so I'm just going to do a quick summary of all the amazing advice and wisdom and vulnerability. Thank you so much, the panelists. I think the unbelievably foundational themes that we got from our discussion today was awareness. First of all, bring awareness to it, and then be nice to yourself. Accept that everyone has some sort of mental or emotional hardship that they're going on. Love yourself. Be real with yourself. Be real. Accept that you got it. Be real with yourself. Bring intention to what it is that you're doing. I call it productive escapism, what Jill touched on. Watch out for doing things like running or working when it's really just you escaping from your own reality. And I think one thing that, of course, is so perfect is accepting that these emotions are not in your head, they're in your body. And this is why we do yoga, and this is why we stretch, and this is why we focus on breathing, which brings me to my closing statement, which is remember to breathe. So everybody, we're going to do it one more time. In for 4, out for 6. Mindfulness is your superpower. Bring awareness. breathe slowly, pay attention, love yourself, reach out to the communities who love you, and remember that in times of adversity, when the traumas are up, you can actually bring gratitude because you are training your adversity quotient to handle stress better in the future. The world needs more calm men, more calm women, more calm leaders, more calm followers, and we can be calm by breathing and by practicing gratitude. Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, Yoga Health Expo. Thank you, MCs and other fellow speakers. Thank you so much to the panelists. I'm pointing over here because it's on screen, but all over the world, for your vulnerability, for leading by example through courage and by sharing all of your wisdom. And of course, thank you so much to all the audience and the live attendees and to everyone who's catching the recording. Thank you guys.